All right, let's start talking about Sakura. And the best way to kind of compare her is we are trying to compare her with Scarlet, regular drunk Scarlet, and as if we paired with this summer anise. And so the theme that I kind of compared it with is with Dorothy, Crown, and Privity. So let's talk about the skill for now. So all she has is she has a pretty standard assault rifle things, 13.65% attack damage, reload time of 1 second, ammo capacity 60, assault rifle, attacker burst 3, wind average as we can kind of see on assault rifle. And just like any other assault rifle, we are very reliant on the skills. It's not really about their basic attacks that is really more valuable. It's all about how the skills interact with her. Basically, she does sustain damage. Think of it like poison or burn, take damage, damage over time. However, when I call it, that's the sustained damage. And she plays around about upkeeping the sustained damage by destroying the enemy part. If we cannot destroy the enemy part, there is a about 50% uptime. So this skill 2 is basically the attack damage buff and then also a sustained damage every 1 second for 15 seconds, and it has a cooldown time of 30 seconds. So if there is no parts to destroy that is coming from skill 1, then skill 2 will kind of just proc it every 30 seconds for and last for 15 seconds. Now this thing though is basically that's where skill 1 comes in. Every time we destroy an enemy part, then we get sustained damage increase for herself, and then it will increase the duration of the dancing flower and Sakura petals, which is basically the skill 2. It increases the duration. This duration seems to be pretty interesting. Now, does it exceed the base 15 seconds? So does that mean we have to control, like, okay, after when there's 5 seconds left, okay, that's when we start destroying it? Or does it add on top of it? I'm hoping that it's gonna add on top of it, but yeah, we'll just see once she's actually released. But ideally, I'm hoping that this is much more like easier for the player and it just stacks up. Otherwise, it's gonna be so annoying to control. Like, okay, is there like 5 seconds left? Then that's when we start destroying the parts. Or it depends on if there's the enemy has like continuously destroying parts, and that way we can have like a 100% uptime on her skill 2. And this skill 2 is pretty crucial because that will kind of determine how much more effective she is on the map. And then the burst skill, TLDR, is it seems like it can get up to 8,000 multiplier or higher on that one. Obviously there's other multipliers also. There's sustained additional attack damage and stuff, but basically it gets up to 8,000 because there is a 457 multiplied by 10. That's how I'm assuming how this is working. Otherwise it would be really weird, and this is attacking random enemies anyway, so yeah, I guess that's what would make sense. Unless they're dividing it into 10 times, then that sounds really bad. And then there's the 35%. It does stack up to 10 times and lasts for 10 seconds. I think if I saw the feature that they had, the showcase, it seems like she is able to get these 10 attacks within 2 seconds. That's what people are saying. My eyes were not that great, but I'll take it as how it is. So you probably have about like 11 to 10 12 seconds of this sustained damage, but obviously their first second is probably like only 5, and then the second is gonna have the 10, so like 12 seconds plus or minus. 8,000 plus attack multiplier sounds really good. Now, how does she fare? So what I tried to compare her with is this Scarlet and it comes out roughly, if there is parts and we can upkeep this skill 2 with 100% uptime, she does about 35%, 30 plus percent more damage than Scarlet. That is on the assumption though that the team that I'm using is, instead of red tier, I would use Summer Sakura, and I'm using Dorothy, Crown, Privity, Maxwell. And so Maxwell is helping out on buffing Summer Sakura. Now, here's some caveats though, right? Especially say like you have like a high core Privity and Maxwell, that might prevent your Summer Sakura from getting the buff from it. But I'm just giving an example. And here's another thing for Summer Sakura is she is gonna be way better if you have attack buffers. So to give you an idea, right now if I have Privity's buff and Crown's buff, and then I have Maxwell that's getting the buff as well from her skill 1, which is like 43%, and she does about 35% more damage than Scarlet. And this Scarlet, I just wanted to emphasize, this is actually Scarlet with the Summer Anise buff also alongside with it, and also other buff, which is the Crown and Privity, and then also her own buff. It comes out, if we have like a optimal team, it does come out like about 30% more or higher. And here's the kicker, I haven't added in yet, what if I add like 40% attack on Summer Sakura? If I add 40% attack on Summer Sakura, and also I guess 40% attack on Scarlet also, and let's just assume that's like overload. For some reason, if they have both overload of 40% attack, it actually is, there is a bigger gap basically. So it becomes from 35% that you saw earlier, now the difference is 46%. And basically so it shows here 650 mil damage here, and then for Scarlet is 444. And so how it basically means is the more attack percentage you have, the more efficient Summer Sakura is. Assuming that I'm not using Rosanna here, I'm just gonna use the Privity, Crown, and Maxwell. If I try to remove it so that I only have 50% uptime on the buff on skill 2 in here, and because we're not refreshing with skill 1, what's gonna come out is the difference is actually her damage ends up being a lot more closer to what Scarlet's damage is. And so yeah, there's like barely any difference right now, assuming that I'm using Maxwell, Privity, Crown, and stuff. And so again, kind of how I see it is, if there is parts, she is definitely really good, and it does show above what Scarlet is providing. But if there is no parts, then the difference is as not so much. And this is a calculation where I have put in 100k attack and 30,000 enemy defense. If you guys didn't know, Solar Raid comes between 100k attack at level 400, and then it gets up to 130k at core 7. So LB0 is 100k and core 7 is about like 130k. And then when the enemy defense is there, it has about 30k enemy defense on a Solar Raid scenario. So this is kind of like I'm putting it more in Solar Raid scenario, and I'm not putting in like campaign or whatnot because there's no really parts on there. So the main stick on it for her is she is definitely advantageous to use if there is enemy parts, because yeah, the damage is a lot more apparent. And to give you a perspective, what does like a 35% damage increase is gonna be, it would actually come closer to a 1 bill damage here. And this is with Red Hood, and it's using, if we're looking at it, this is Red Hood against a boss that doesn't have parts. So actually, if the boss has parts, this red hood would actually damage increase. So this, because this is like shooting range damage. But just to give a perspective, right? The downside though is, let's say like if you're using Maxwell, one downside on it is that Maxwell will also reduce the overall damage, just because Maxwell's damage is typically more on the lower end also. So because of that, with Summer Anise and regular Scarlet coming in versus like Red Hood and Maxwell, there's like an evening out that's happening where Summer Anise does more damage, but then if you put in Maxwell, she will do less damage. But yeah, that's just like one example. Obviously, these are all just kind of rough estimates of the mat. The main thing is elemental advantage, because obviously if you have that great elemental advantage, right? If you're comparing whether, okay, do I want to use regular Scarlet or Summer Sakura, and if the boss is weak against the wind, then the obvious answer is going to be Summer Sakura. And at base damage and base like stats, she does come out roughly close to regular drunk Scarlet, which seems to be kind of nice. But yeah, the downside there is, if there's anything big that I do want to point out, is the regular drunk Scarlet is, she only really needs like that skill one. For Summer Sakura, the thing about her is her burst damage is about 40% of her damage. It is a pretty huge chunk, and so there is a huge incentive to skill up both the burst damage and skill 2. And I would imagine the skill 1, the scaling 1 in particular, that we would want there is just to make sure that we have enough duration or bonus so that we can keep a 100% uptime on skill 2. I would imagine it's probably going to be like level 7 or level 4 on skill 1, just because we don't have to, it depends. If the boss has a lot of enemy parts, then that's probably all we really need. Probably just need to destroy 2 parts at level with like skill 1 level 7. Maybe it's gonna be 7.5 or something like that, so it would turn out to be 15 seconds, and so this would end up being 30 seconds, which basically is like 100% uptime on skill 2. That's kind of how I see it, of how they might do it. But yeah, I could imagine not needing to invest too much on skill 1, but maxing out on skill 2, because there is a good amount of damage coming from just the burn / sustain damage. I wonder how much of this 256% of final attack would actually be effective though in PvP. It does affect the enemy with the highest attack, and it does hit for 256%, but the PvP ends within like the burst starts happening within like 4 seconds or so, and so that means that you will actually get like about 1,000 damage before the burst starts happening. So maybe I could see her trying to snipe some of the higher attack units. The only downside is the burst is a lot more random, and typically since you have one, you don't want to put too much like assault rifle unit or any other unit and like attacker burst 3 position. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, this skill 2 might end up actually giving some burst gen, because that's one of the things that I think allows Haran to kind of get like extra burst generation, is because of the sustained damage. So this is possible. It's possible that it could make up for it. So I don't know. Actually, maybe now that I think about it, maybe she might end up being PvP. But I think we'll just have to see though how it's gonna end up. So actually, the more I think about it, the more she might end up being used in PvP too. Well, Yeah. A downside is it's gonna be RNG. Yeah, fun. And another thing is, I think with Rosanna, maybe she might open up a different set of Team 5. As you guys know, the different Team 4, Team 5 right now is really like there's the Electric team with Exia Treasure, and then there's the Rocket Launcher team with Rem and Lapus Treasure, and then there's the Shotgun team also with Bunny Soda and Alice. This might be another separate different type of combo that we could go into, and it's something that is going to be boss dependent, right? Like for example, Shotgun team is not always going to be used in a lot of bosses, especially if the boss is farther away. And the Drunk Scarlet team with Summer Anise and Exia is actually pretty good, but only if it's electric advantage. If it's not electric advantage, it's actually it doesn't perform that super great. And so this is gonna be one of the teams that would be like a parts team, right? Like with Summer Sakura and Summer Rosanna. What's the TLDR with Summer Sakura? Basically, at base performance, seems like she is roughly around Drunk Scarlet's level. However, unlike Drunk Scarlet, which doesn't really benefit from attack buff that much, she is very attack buff reliant for basically giving her attack buff, which is one of the most abundant buffs out there for available for us, and there's a lot of multipliers for it. Then she is actually gonna make a huge difference. Think of like say Snow White. Obviously Snow White though she has like huge synergy with Yulha, but Snow White is much more better with like a lot of attack buffs because they don't have attack buff in their own kit, and so they do really benefit a lot on it. And there's a lot of supports already that gives attack buff, right? For example, Miranda is just one example. Litter and anything else, and she really wants the boss with respawning parts, because if there is no boss without like respawning parts, the uptime on that skill is probably on the lower end, and the damage, we do take a huge damage hit if we cannot get like a good uptime on that skill too. And another thing is she is a good wind DPS option, but then again, there isn't really a lot of many options out there. And getting actually a unit that is on the Drunk Scarlet level as a wind DPS option is a good option, especially for those people that do want to use for solo raid, especially competitively on wind. But now here's the thing though, for union raid, nah, I mean, the question is what kind of team it will be if you put her in Union Raid, right? And the thing is, there's if you have like a wind DPS to choose from, then you would rather choose Scarlet Black Shadow. It's just that the damage of Scarlet Black Shadow is just way more, right? It's like 1.8, right? So just to give an example on a neutral here, Scarlet Black Shadow is just doing 1.8 on this boss that has core in him. And you know, looking at the regular Drunk Scarlet, you're doing less than half. It's 750. So even if say like you give like 30% damage increase, 30-40% damage increase, at best it would reach a red hood damage of like around 1 bill. And the thing is, this 1 bill, also this red hood, obviously this is not Pierce situation, this is against a boss that doesn't have Pierce capacity on it. And so if the boss has Pierce on it, red hood would deal about 1.5 or a little bit more, just because for this example on my account, she would deal way more and probably deal about double of what Scarlet is doing. So it's not saying much in terms of just as a DPS option, but I mean honestly it's still good nonetheless. So yeah, the way I see it is she is a little bit above the Drunk Scarlet's level from what it looks like. but not is as great as say if Red Hood is piercing or like Scarlet Black Shadow's level of damage. That's just a very high bar to surpass, and from what it looks like. And to be fair, yeah, I mean, I guess like it's against like a pilgrim, so that's probably why. And yeah, the way I see it is when DPS boss needs parts, otherwise like the skill 2 is not as much effective. Overall, the way I see it is obviously it's gonna be a bossing unit, a win DPS option, but is it gonna be a unit that you must use in many other situation? Probably not. I think that we are going to be slowly shifting into just focusing on just elemental advantages, and you're just gonna have to start changing up like your units and deciding which units to use what depending on the boss element. At the end of the day though, I actually am gonna pull for her because again there's just not a lot of win DPS options, and I am kind of like I do want to invest in her just so that I have a solo raid for win DPS, and you guys know how it is for me here.